Hello, Trinity family. As we continue with encouragement for the family, today I want to begin probably what would be somewhat of a series on biblical manhood. Um, I don't know that today's message will be really encouraging, other than the fact that I want to discuss the fact that there really is an attack on biblical manhood today. And I want to present that case to you, although I think you see it and you would agree with me, so that in the videos to follow, I can talk about biblical manhood and how we can help our boys to become men and to become godly men. So this will serve as an introduction to those, and it is to understand that there really is an attack on biblical manhood. Manhood and masculinity have been under attack for a long time. I would say surely for decades. I grew up in the equal rights era, and those that are my age and older know what I mean. I'm referring to those days when there was a big push to pass an equal rights amendment designed to guarantee equal rights for women, as though they didn't have equal rights already under the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. But feminists of that day turned against a patriarchal system and moved into a man-haters club. By the 1970s and 80s, the feminist movement adopted a women can do anything men can do and better mentality. I remember the days of angry women who were offended by men that tried to treat women like ladies. I have a personal illustration of that, but I'll spare you of that at this point. Radical feminism's goals and intentions went way beyond reaching equal footing with men. The goal was actually total domination of men. And in my view, when radical feminists finally realized they lost the battle to end male domination, the next best thing was to neutralize gender distinction. So we moved into an androgynous culture. Among other things, clothing became suitable for either sex. Boys grew their hair long, girls shortened theirs. The idea of blending the sexes was that it would help relationships in society, but it didn't. It only feminized boys. Now we fast forward to today, where we're facing a total assault on traditional male and female roles and gender distinctions. We are way past making attempts to neutralize the sexes, and we've moved into the transgender world. We've moved into gender fluidity. We've moved into multiple genders, as though that's possible. Way back in 2011, a family from Toronto, Canada, became known worldwide for raising a genderless son by keeping his sex a secret from birth. They already had two other boys named Jazz, who was 5, and Kaio, 2, but were raising them to make their own choices, including choices as to whether they wanted to identify as boys or girls. The mom has since contributed to the chapter of a book titled Chasing Rainbows, Exploring Gender Fluid Parenting Practices. And that reveals it all, doesn't it? It's all about removing gender distinction. But it just isn't possible to do that, is it? It isn't possible because of how God made man and woman differently and for distinct purposes and roles. With all that in mind, we have a crisis of masculinity in America. Young men are failing to reach mature adulthood in massive numbers. Satan has used society to neutralize both masculinity and the man. And what models do young men have today to understand manhood? Has the TV and media outlets given an appropriate image? No. In Situation comedies on television, the man, the husband, the fathers have been portrayed as imbeciles and buffoons, while the women, the wives, and the mothers are smarter and the ones that are really in control. In some cases, they just sort of make their husbands believe they're in control or think they're in control when they're really not. Boys are being neutralized by our society. Society's biggest tool in this is the government schools. Using that tool, our educational system is pushed to conform children into what they want to be the norms. They are molding and shaping our children in what they want them to be. They don't allow for any absolutes but their own. They have de-emphasized gender differences. Much is presented through open discussions where every opinion is equally valid. And they're drowning children in sensitivity training and gross political correctness. Men, we have a problem. Manhood and masculinity has been under attack, and it has affected us. It has had an effect even on our own homes. I think it has had an effect on the church. It seems that good and godly male leadership is on the verge of near extinction. I could illustrate this by telling you that in the last many, many years, girls and women have taken leadership by default. Where there has been an absence of male leadership, girls and women have filled the void. And I'm not demeaning them for doing it. They took the leadership positions. If you look at the average Christian school, including our own, when there is leadership, most often it's the girls that are displaying it. Yes, I'm speaking in generalities, and there are boys that are leading. But I think even if we look at the average Christian church, there's an absence of strong male leadership where sometimes women fill the void. Way back in 1980, James Dobson said this: "The Western world stands in a great crossroads in its history. It is my opinion that our survival as a people will depend upon the presence or absence of masculine leadership in millions of homes. Husbands hold the keys to the preservation of the family." So war has been declared on masculinity. War has been declared on the family for quite some time, even before that. God has appointed you, men, to be the leader of your home, and you must defeat these enemies. The survival of your family and the church depends on you. You must know the enemies. You must anticipate the attacks on your family and the church. What are we up against? Where will more attacks come from? Only you, men, can make the difference. Will you preserve your family and lead in both your home and the church? Your wife and children need you to lead. The church needs male leadership. Leading your family and the church through the chaos of society is critical. Our families are at stake. Our kids are at stake. Even our church is at stake. And you cannot delegate the leadership that we are talking about to someone or to something else. You can't delegate family leadership. You can get help, but you can't delegate your responsibility away. You can't give it away to the church. You can't give it away to pastors and youth leaders. You can't give it away to the Christian school teachers. God holds you, men, accountable for how your family turns out. Satan's strategy is to neutralize the man and masculinity, and he will use society and culture to do it. A godly man doesn't just go with the flow. He lives counterculturally. He brings his children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. He seeks to please God and glorify him with his family. We have too many passive men, too many indifferent men, too many directionless men, preoccupied men, and even carnal men. We must be the kind of men that God calls us to be, and we must lead for him. So the question, men, are you leading your families? Are you leading them in the word and the ways of God? Are you leading them to be what God wants them to be? Men, are you raising your boys to be godly, masculine men? And how are you doing? Such an important question. Throughout these videos, I've stressed the fact that parents need to disciple their own children, and have emphasized that dads, you have to take the leadership role on this. And if we're letting that slip, let's refocus to do that. Let's ask God to give us the strength, the temperament, the ability to lead our families well, to raise godly families for Christ, who will follow the mission that God has given us to do. And so that the next generation then does that and passes it on to their children and to their grandchildren. Again, this is not necessarily an encouraging video to talk about the attack on biblical manhood, but I wanted to make the case so that in the future videos, we can talk about real biblical manhood. What does it look like? How do we encourage our boys to become the kind of men that God wants them to be for his glory? So we'll see you next time as we begin to look into that. It's really based on a series of Sunday school lessons I did shortly before I left Maine, when I was leading adult Bible studies. And I hope it'll be a help and encouragement to us as we consider that important topic.